Gogatz is currently associated with JUNIA and ESCE in France and has an impressive career teaching in 24 countries and lecturing at 49 institutions. He's also the director of the World Innovation Team, a consultancy based in Southern California, USA. Basically, his work focuses on breaking invisible barriers in business creativity. And let me tell you guys that he has authored three books on the subject with business creativity, breaking the invisible barriers, being widely read and translated into multiple languages.
Dr. Gogatz, now I'd like to request you to start by giving us a brief overview of what constitutes a startup and how it differs from the traditional business.
Okay, good. Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone, and it's a pleasure to be with you. I always enjoy lecturing, especially when I'm in India. I haven't been to India for a few years now, but I always used to love to go there. And I worked on the Smart City program for quite a number of years. So I did have a good background of talking to entrepreneurs in India. So like to focus the talk today on two subjects with entrepreneurship. One tends to be marketing and the other tends to be hiring, because I think those two areas are really critical when you start a business. I'll give you examples from my own background, my own business, etc. But really want to talk a little bit in general about these two subjects. When I talk to entrepreneurs and in my teaching and in my travels, I get to do that a lot. The entrepreneurs usually begin with one sentence. They usually say, I have a good idea for a new business. And then they start to talk about their product or their service. When it's a young entrepreneur, especially in India, a lot of them talk about applications. That's sort of normal. But okay, their product or their service. And they go on and on about it. They talk about themselves, sometimes if it's a group, because sometimes you get more than one person who is involved in the new business. They talk about themselves. What they don't talk about, and it's really important, is the customer. Okay. Now, there is a statement in creativity innovation, and the statement is if a string, I have a string, if a string has one end, then it has another end. Okay. Now, when you tell this to people, you say, what do you think about that? Most of the people say, that's obvious. If you push them a little bit more and say, but okay, but what does it tell you? They say, well, it's silly. It's so obvious. The statement, if a string has one end, then it has another, applies to marketing, applies to entrepreneurship in this way. What's one end of the string? You, your company, your product, your service. What's the other end? Customer. What is the message? The two are forever connected. You cannot ever get rid of the customer unless you're out of business. There's another really important point. Which end is more important, this end or this end? They're equally important. And that's the message. When you start a business, what I find is most entrepreneurs are too involved with themselves and their product and their service and what they want to bring to the market and sell. And after that, then they start to way down the road a little bit. They're talking about target market, they're talking about customer, but the two are not equal in importance. And this little metaphor basically says, don't ever forget that the customer is equally important as your company or your product or your service. Now, there's one other point. Most people start a business that they want to start. I have a good idea. Okay, I want to do this business. Good entrepreneurs can run any business. If you can only run one, you're not an entrepreneur. You're a small business person. It's a big difference. So, what are we basically saying immediately? Don't start a business you want to start. Start one that a certain group of customers that you can identify as a target market, what they want, what they've been waiting for, what they are would be really happy with. It's a big difference because too many entrepreneurs that I consult with, young companies, I'm not talking about people who don't have a company. These are startup companies that I consult with. Most of the time, their question is, why aren't enough people buying my product or service? Well, the answer is you're marketing something that they didn't ask for. So if you're going to market something and sell it to yourself, that's fine. You can do it that way. But if you're going to sell it to a group of people, you got to find out what they want. So a good business says and begins with a target market. What does this target market need, want that they don't have? What can I provide them? And can I reach them? If you do that from a marketing point of view and from a business point of view, you'll probably be successful. Okay, now, one of the things you need to do also is design your product or service with your target market in mind. Most entrepreneurs don't do that. They design it for themselves, put it out there, and then see who wants to buy it. When you design a product or service with your target market in mind, you'll be probably more successful. Now, I can give you examples. We don't have that much time, so I'll only really mention maybe one. Starbucks did that. When Howard Schultz started his company back in the early 1980s, his idea was to not really coffee. Coffee was an excuse. He basically said there's people that need a place to go. They need a place to hang out, maybe to kill some time between meetings, maybe just to get out of the house or the apartment and go sit someplace else that's comfortable and just stay there for a couple hours and not have to pay a lot of money for food. Okay. So he basically could have rented a chair to people, but they wouldn't have done it. So he basically used coffee, which is a beverage which is cheap and plentiful, as an excuse to go sit there for a couple of hours. And it worked very well. He designed his whole operation for his target market because he said to his baristas, talk to the customer. Why? Because he knew they would be alone or maybe in a group of two. You don't have big groups that go to Starbucks. Never did. So he said, talk to them about coffee. Remember their names. Remember, make them feel special. This means he designed his service around his target market. And because of that, he was successful. Now, he did other things that made him successful, but this was one of them. Now, there's one other thing which is important, and it goes back to marketing. Most of the people and the young companies I deal with on a consulting level, when I look at their marketing and their marketing communications, it's all about themselves. They show me their marketing communications. They say, Professor, what do you think about it? I say, you're talking about yourself. You're giving information, but that's all you're doing. First off, giving information is one part of marketing, but it's only one part. If that's all you do, tell somebody, hey, I exist, my product or service is available, you're not going to be successful. Because marketing has two things. There's the information stage and there's the persuasion stage, which means what do you tell the people to get them to buy a product or service that they probably don't need. Why do I say that? Because 80% of the products and services we buy, we don't need. Ladies, how many pairs of shoes do you have? How many do you need? Coca-Cola is one of the most successful products in the world. Never loses money. Do you need Coca-Cola? No. Does anybody need Coca-Cola? No. You need liquid, but you don't need that one. Okay. So you've got to realize most people, when you start your business, are not going to go, wow, 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 this is wonderful. Yeah, your family will, your friends will, but you can't make a business just selling to them. If you start a restaurant, first week it's crowded. Who? Your family and friends. Second week, who's there? Nobody. Third week, the friends of friends a little bit. But I mean, come on, you got to do more than that. So you have to get the marketing right. Of all the things you need to do when you start a business, the most important thing is to get the marketing right. Because if you don't break even, unless you're lucky enough to sell your business to a bigger company who's going to buy you out, and that does happen, but otherwise you got to make money. And if you have too long without making money, you got to close the business. Talk about. I'll give you three options. One, yourself. Two, the other person. Three, everything. Everything means studies, family, travel, food, cinema, absolutely everything. So if you go out on a date, what do you mainly talk about? Yourself, the other person, or everything? Well, when you ask this question to most people, they say everything. According to this, and according to even marketing, what should you talk about? Them. You should talk about the other person. Why? One of the main statements in marketing is the customer only cares about what the product or service does for them. They don't care about your product or service. So, what does that mean? Don't talk about yourself. Talk about your product or service in the context of the life of your customer. Okay, give me an example. You go to buy a new car. What's the first thing you do? You look at the car. What's the second thing you do? They ask you, do you want to drive it? And they let you drive it. Why? Because when you do, it's you with the product or service, you take psychologically ownership of it. Most companies don't do that. They don't involve the customer in their marketing messaging. One last thing in marketing. Most young entrepreneurs today think marketing is Facebook, Google Ads, digital marketing. I teach digital marketing. Digital marketing is one aspect of marketing. Most companies use more than just digital means. The advantage of digital is it's cheap. Okay. The other advantage is you can measure a bit who sees your ad. But the downside of digital is the messaging is not as good as in traditional. You need to have the right message. So get the marketing right. If you're going to hire one good person, make it a marketing person. Because most of the time, if you're going to have a problem, that's where the problem is. You just don't have enough sales. Okay. I want to, after I finish talking, because professors can talk all day, but that doesn't really help you. So I want to get to questions afterwards and have enough time for that, because I would rather answer what you want to know rather than just let me talk. But there's a couple points that I think are still important. And one of them pertains to hiring. First off, before that, you have to realize starting a business is wonderful. Why? You get to design how you do everything. You can design all your procedures, all your culture, everything. Most entrepreneurs don't. They copy the businesses that exist. They don't really design something that is different and works. Go back to Starbucks. Yeah, he did. He did something different. He hired university students. He realized that the frontline employees needed to be able to talk to customers about different topics. So he hired people, part-time people that were a little more aware of what was going on, a little smarter, a little more bang, 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 because he knew otherwise if he just took normal frontline people, because frontline staff usually least qualified, least paid, least trained, least educated, it wouldn't really work. So Howard Schultz was smart enough to realize he needed to not just do the normal type of business, but okay. Good question before we talk about hiring. Are you ready to start a business? I think that's a question you have to ask yourself. Maybe you have a new idea. Maybe you've got an application, but are you ready? Because a business entails more than just coming up with an idea. And a lot of times people aren't. Why? Because you've got to deal with people, you've got to deal with customers, you've got to deal with finance. Okay. Now, how about hiring? Well, Steve Jobs of Apple famously said his biggest contribution at Apple was to hire the right people. And he said that's probably the most important thing in any new company. Now, I'll be honest with you. My background is marketing. My background is advertising. And years ago, I didn't think hiring was as important as marketing. Now I do. Why? If you hire or start working with the wrong people, I'm not talking about bad people. I'm just saying the wrong people, you're not going to be successful. When I also, I'll tell you a story. When I was in India last time, I was talking to some young entrepreneurs. It happened to be at a hackathon. And there was one young man, very, very nice guy. He had an idea for a business. I asked him a couple questions. I said, would you be willing to move from the city where you live? He lived in central India, to another city if that was important to make your business a success. He said, no. I said, would you be willing to live apart from your family and your partner, because he was married, for an extended period of time to make your business a success? He said, no. He was working full time and trying to develop his new business. I said, well, would you be willing to quit your job and devote 100% to the new business? He said, no. That means he wanted success on his terms. That's impossible, or pretty much impossible. You need to commit to your business. If you don't, not only are you probably not going to be successful, but the people who work with you are not going to commit to the business either. Why? Because the boss has to basically say, I'm really serious. I'm not going to just give it up. Get there early, stay late, work like crazy. Yeah, that's okay. But you got to commit to it. So how about hiring? Well, many people, they hire their friends and family. It's not easy to tell your family when your mother comes to you and says, hey, your cousin needs a job. And you said, yeah, but they don't really fit in. Yeah, but they need a job in there. Okay, so you hire your cousin. and maybe it's cheap. Does that really work? Maybe not. I mean, imagine you had to start a professional football team or basketball or any kind of sport. We just had the Olympics. And you had to start a football team. So who are you going to put on it? Well, you're going to put your uncle on it. Yeah, but he's 40 years old and out of shape. Yeah, but he's your uncle. You're going to win? No. You're going to hire your uncle? Yeah, maybe. Don't rely on cheap people in key positions. Don't take too many people. Most new businesses are overstaffed. Most new businesses don't need the amount of people they have. Why? Most of those people are working not 100% flat out, not like they should. They're working, they're not taxed. So don't hire so many people. Make sure the people you do hire are really, really good. I would recommend looking at a theory which was really pushed a bit by two people. One is the guy who started Netflix, Reed Hastings, and the other is Steve Jobs. And it's called talent density. And the idea in talent density, because most of the time they don't teach it too much in entrepreneurship, the idea in talent density is hire really good people. Understand you have to pay them okay, even more than you want to. Understand they won't stay forever. And don't micromanage them. Give them freedom, and they will work really well and they will produce. Go for the better people. He said some people are worth 10 others. And what Steve Jobs said famously, that's the people we want at Apple. We don't want the mediocre, adequate people, because almost every startup starts out with some people that are okay. And what did Jobs and Hastings find? Now, Netflix is a successful company, so was Apple. Not in the beginning, but once Jobs went back to it. What they found was a couple of adequate people can screw up the whole thing. Imagine you're cooking. You're making some kind of a dish. You add an ingredient to what you're cooking. It changes the taste. One employee that's not really good, and I'm not talking about everyone has to think alike and we have to have the same culture, because that's another trap. But one employee that's not really good can really sabotage everything. Why? Because a startup doesn't have thousands of employees. You've only got some. Make sure who you hire. Don't take anybody. Don't take anybody that's just available. Also, go to Ray Kroc of McDonald's, the entrepreneur we associate with the modern McDonald's. What did he always say? Look at people, don't look at their resumes. Most of the time, what do we hire for? We hire for stability. We hire for don't give any problems, don't rock the boat. We don't hire for diversity. We don't hire people who can tell the boss what they're doing right and what they're doing wrong. We just hire people who go, yes, sir. That's not the people you want to hire. You as an entrepreneur need people who are going to tell you the truth. And you're going to need people who are good at what you're not good at. What I see often amongst young people, which is normal, who are your friends? Same age, same sex, same background? They're your friends. Who you start the business with? Them. That's a problem. Why? Because you think alike? Because you have a certain rapport? Bring in people who are older, bring in people who are different, bring in people with different talents. Ray Kroc famously said, if a company has two executives who think alike, we don't need one of them. Oh, that's totally different than what companies do. So what do I see? I see entrepreneurs trying to pretend they're a big company, and they do things like the big companies, but they're not a big company. And they don't hire the right people. They hire people who are available, and then they're stuck with them because they